Sorry. There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody, and I'm absolutely delighted that Tade Thompson is joining us tonight. Tade, you'll have to forgive us because we've just had an hour-and-a-half class this evening on a different topic. So if we seem a little bit sleepy or slow in our responses, it's just because it's a long evening for us. And I'm sure it's a long day for you as well, having been at work today. We've been studying.
It is.
Yeah, bless you. You had a busy day.
It's always busy, especially during Corona time. So, it's always fun. But that's the job.
So we've been, as you know, we were studying Rosewater, and we were thinking about ideas of mycology and the study of mushrooms. And we've asked our MA students to put together some questions for you. So some of them have submitted questions in advance, and some of them are probably just going to raise their hand as we go along. But I wondered if maybe I could start with a question from Liam. So Liam, did you want to ask your question to Tade? If he's with us. Oh, his mic isn't working. Okay, I'll read that one out for you. So one of the things we're looking at in Rosewater was the question of neo-colonialism. And you'd said in an interview with somebody that there's this idea of a kind of invisible, insidious colonization that was the sort of one of the starting points for you thinking about the novel. And Liam was asking whether you could see any connection with ideas of ongoing disaster, particularly ecological disaster, I guess, and what some people have been calling crisis ordinariness, but now we just live with crisis and catastrophe. And he wanted to know whether you had thought about Rosewater as being even more relevant maybe than when you published it.
Okay, well, thanks for that question. So I think the first thing I'm going to say, again, because I'm interested in the human mind, the first thing I'm going to say is about how humans respond to problems, to aversive stimulus. One of the very first things we do is we accommodate to it. So the period of maximum anxiety when there is a disaster or when there is an attack or a threat begins. But the moment it begins, our brains get stimulated. We get a lot of cerebral activation because we're looking at it and we're trying to categorize what's happening to us so that we can check in our library of responses to see if there's anything, if this is something that is like something we've encountered before, so that we can mount some kind of defense or to run away. Now, if it's not, we need to be calm in order to properly assess what's going on. So what happens is we actually get used to it. Whatever is happening, no matter how horrible it is. So if you're in a flood, for example, when the water is coming into your house, you are anxious and you're scared, and you start to do things. And even if in the end you end up sitting on your roof, painting a sign on the roof saying, "Help! There are 4 of us here," calmer than when it started, all right? Because it becomes something. It's the new normal. You have accommodated to it. So one of the reasons why I picked a very slow alien invasion is that it doesn't trigger an immediate response. In fact, it probably doesn't trigger any response at all. It occurs to me that the kinds of things that we're facing in the world today are slow, seem to be like that. So any thinking person can take global warming and say, yes, this is definitely a danger to humanity, and it's a danger to the planet, but it's a danger tomorrow. So we're not going to argue with you. We're just not going to do anything about it. All right. And we'll talk about it because talking makes us feel good. All right. Talking stimulates, the dopamine parts of our brains and all of that. But we're not going to do anything about it because it's tomorrow. So who cares? All right. So even people who do care are as complacent as people who don't care. And, capitalism marches on, because they will even commodify your outrage. So it doesn't really matter to the industrialists They don't care. So a slow invasion taking place over time becomes unstoppable because you just don't mount a defense. And that's what's happening with, the world as it is. Early on in the pandemic, I listened to a lecture where what we're told is, yes, logging, especially to places where humans have never been before, is exposing lots of diseases. And COVID-19 won't be the last one that will come out of that. And it will continue unless we stop trying to explore places that humans haven't been before, because they will keep throwing up microorganisms that we've never been exposed to before. But did that slow logging down? No. Did that slow us exploring places down? No, it did not. And because it's slow, it's not. If that's the thread of the question. Do I think my book is relevant to these days? I do. It's even like in the creeping, and I'm really sorry to get into the politics of the matter, but the book is about politics anyway. In the creeping fascism, for example, in what is a globalized but slow acceptance, the middle right, or now, of the extreme right. In other words, the people who were more middle of the road decided that, okay, look, we're just going to ignore the rougher aspects of the people in the far right and accept them into the fold, because that's the way to political power. Whatever this doctrine is, has spread all around the world. So basically, what's happening in America, what happens in the UK, it's all about the slow acceptance of what used to be extreme values as mainstream. All right. And because it's happening slowly, and it has happened slowly, most of the people have just allowed it to happen. So there's not enough reaction to it. So to me, I see these as patterns of invasion, of thought, or invasion of pollution, or invasion of the things that we say are world-killing or existence-killing events, basically. That's kind of the way I see it. I hope that answers your question, because I felt like I was rambling a bit.
I mean, it answers my question, just to kind of tag on to that, Tade, because, I mean, even when I try not to teach the students about capitalism, it just seems to keep coming up. Many of the texts we've put on this particular module, yours included, have an environmental or an ecological theme to them. And so when you're talking about, the kind of the inevitability of the creeping fascism and the way in which the current eco-catastrophe and the pandemic ties into that through, human contact with microorganisms that we previously had no contact with. I don't know how you would respond to this. So I've had people say, we're being kind of very explicitly anti-capitalist in teaching these kinds of materials, which now we know the British UK current government has an issue with, particularly in secondary schools. I mean, for you, is it just that's part of the current world system, or is it are you deliberately setting out to show us that this is a difficult, dangerous and problematic mode of production, way of living, if you like?
Okay, so let me I'll put it this way. Positioning myself as an African, all right? We had our own modes of exchange before colonialism, all right? We had our ways of exchange, ways of managing ourselves and all of that, which is, wasn't exactly what we see now, but we had our ways of managing things. So currencies were introduced, let's put it that way, okay? Currencies were introduced, and we were kind of forced to take on currencies. When we realized that currencies were not as effective or as useful to us as what was done before, we, some of us said, okay, actually, no, we're not doing that. And they brought Maxim guns, and they wiped out entire villages that wouldn't cooperate with the new cash crop system, which didn't favor us. It favored the countries that things were being exported to. Even in simple things like the kinds of crops that we could grow locally that would benefit us, we were told, no, don't grow this kind of coffee, grow the other kind of coffee, because that's what we need. And when we talk of neocolonialism, the entire purpose of neocolonialism is actually for profit making. It's for profit making. The idea of it, The entire idea of it is to create desires that are looking westward. All right, the desires are looking westward. So if you go to Nigeria, just drop a pin on the map and go to any part of the things that are desirable are the things that are Western. Right? So we want the clothes, the food, right? We want the look, we want the music to sound like that. If you listen to contemporary music from Nigeria right now, in almost any genre, you'll find that what is favored is a kind of electronic type of, and this is what most people want to listen to. I personally don't like it, but this is what most people want to listen to. And it is interesting to me how far these things have gone. The same thing happens in the case of religion. So natural, the religions of the lands, the ones that came with us, so to speak, are despised, and it's either Christianity or Islam. In fact, I actually listened to a podcast today that was saying, "Oh, Nigeria is 50% Islam and 50% Christianity." That's pardon my language, is a crock of shit, But because when you're filling a census, you're not going to write in there that I worship the old gods of the earth. You can't say that because there's a stigma attached to it now. You come into a place and you impose a system of economics and a system of government and a system of values and a set of desires that favor area. There's no other way I can frame this. And to me, this is not even a political. There is no other way to frame it for me.
Thank you, Tade. Do we have Will Farrington with us? Because Will put a question up if he wanted to ask it himself.
Yeah. Hi, Tade. Really nice to meet you. I had a question.
Hi.
Well, I wanted to ask you, your depiction of a Nigeria in the future is one still beset by the problems that it has today, such as AIDS and poverty. And whereas certain other Afrofuturist texts are more utopian in their outlook. So I was wondering why you decided to portray an African future in this way.
Okay. Right. So the thing is that utopias are a myth. All right. Now we can have as much wishful thinking as we like, right? And we can bring out our drums and bang out our kumbayas and all of that. But a utopia is a myth. There is always a dystopia with a utopia. It's always, it is always, but they're bundled together. All right. The thing that I see in a lot of science fiction writers, one thing I notice is that there's a particular thing in science fiction, especially futuristic science fiction, is not about the at all. It's actually about the present. And I think that sometimes empty science fiction about adventuring or about a future where everything is fine, or about a place where all the problems of the present are somehow eliminated or have become irrelevant. That we need, in my opinion, are not about the kind of science and technology tinkering. What we need are actually social, scientific, technological advances, where we think about the structures of society and decide, actually, this isn't working for us. What else can we do here? How can we move forward from this way we are living? All right. We need revolutions of the mind and revolutions of society in that sense. And that's what needs to be futuristic. All right. But the idea that somehow to get to 30, 100 years time and transphobia will be somehow eliminated, it's kind of naive. All right. If you can't face, and sometimes I think those are ways of not facing the problem. Say we have jumped to the solution, whereas we're not addressing how it got solved. I think that it's somehow, and to somehow just eliminate, think they're gone. So yay, everything is fine in the future. I think it's irresponsible. One of the things that I've also noticed in people who write about this is how it is done. So we kind of do the same thing. So you're going to get that kind of science fiction as well. The explorer science fiction, or the, I don't know, bikini-clad women on Venus type of rocket ship type of science fiction. You're going to get that too. Um, some of it is because we think that's how it should be done. And, I guess it's escapism for a lot of people. Escapism has its place. But that's not for me.
Did you want to come back up to that, Will?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
I'm really interested, Tade, in you talking about the responsibility of the science fiction author, or perhaps the responsibility that you've chosen for yourself. You think science fiction can be a powerful kind of tool of political critique for us?
Science fiction is probably the best tool there is, because you are not bound in time or space or narrative structure or even how you choose to represent human beings. You can use a hive mind, you can use a single mind, you can use a fragmented mind. You don't have to follow whatever the accepted history is. You can follow the minority types of histories. You can do pretty much whatever you like in order to illustrate a point. And the best thing about it is that it tends to, at least in a place like Nigeria, for example, it tends to slip under the gates, or it tends to slip under the notice of the censors, because it's kid stuff, it's science fiction, nobody pays attention to it. So you can actually make a lot of points by doing that. And yeah, it's a lot of power in words that is not always used. It's a shame, because you can use it to do a lot, basically.
Thank you. We've got a question from Louise. Louise, did you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, it's quite a spontaneous one, just listening to you just now. And I'm just wondering whether you define yourself as genre bending or genre defying. And I'm pointing to M. John Harrison's recent comments when he won the Goldsmith Prize, and he talks about the importance of innovation and how innovation is what keeps writing moving. And also, he's obviously known as somebody who's genre defying, I think it would be fair to say. Would you similarly sort of eschew the constraints of genre in your approach to sci-fi?
I do, and I don't personally identify myself as a science fiction writer. I've actually written all kinds of things. I've written crime, I've written horror, I've written memoir. I don't. I just define myself as a writer. I like to write things. I read in all genres, and I write in all genres. And I don't. The classification of whatever I write, I let whoever is reading it decide what it is. I think that classifications serve a particular purpose. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm sure people like the idea of dividing things into neat categories. I mean, it's an inherently human. It's a human trait where we have to, going from the side of trying to decide when you encounter something, is it a friend or foe? Is one of the first things we do when we encounter novel stimulus. So we classify things because it makes us feel safe. It makes us feel calm. I was lucky enough to have a father who didn't even age. He didn't think anything was age appropriate. My father's opinion was always that, look, the point at which you're curious about something is the age at which you need to know about it. So I
Sarah Kilby. Sarah, did you want to ask it? Or I can ask it for
I
you.
know I can. Hi, hello, Tade. Nice to meet you. Love the book. I just wonder, this is more specific.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yep. Specifically, why did
I can
you?
hear you.
Can you hear me? Oh, lovely. Why did you set it in Maiduguri? Is there any specific reason?
It's not only set in Maiduguri. The training camp is set in Maiduguri. So one of the things, so if you go to contemporary Maiduguri, a lot of the terror incidents, the kidnappings of our women, the the Boko Haram incidents, they're happening from there because there's a direct route from there to Chad and to Cameroon where they can basically escape. There's an easy route for insurgents to come in and escape. And that's the reason why the training camp is there, because it's a place of contemporary danger. But also it's a place where there is a variety of natural dangers in terms of swamps, malaria, and dry places as well. So it's both arid and it's both, it's got a lot of places where if you wanted to train an elite squad of soldiers, it would be a good place to train because they would learn all the possible terrains you could need to fight in. And that's the reason for Maiduguri.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, my colleague Sean has a really great question. Sean, did you want to put it to Tade?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. Hi, Tade. It's very nice to meet you. Thanks so much for joining our classroom session this evening. It's very much appreciated, I know, by all of us. I wanted to ask you whether or not you see, and I expect you probably do, but I'm wondering in what ways perhaps you see your novel to be in conversation with the recent end-SARS struggles in Nigeria. For those that don't know, SARS is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And, the reason I ask is because, of course, Rosewater is interested, as you just mentioned, right, in the training of special squads, which are involved in government security. So, yeah, I just wonder how you might put your novel in conversation with these recent and ongoing events.
Okay. So the thing about SARS is that it is a manifestation of a problem that has been there for so long. It's protean. It changes its name, right? So when I was young, what they were called is mobile police, all right? It's the same kinds of murderous people who find themselves above the law. So when I was in Nigeria, they were called mobile police. And then to the tail end of when I was in Nigeria, they changed their name to Mopol. And it continues to change like that. And one of the most incongruous statements that you will find in Nigeria, statement that police is your friend. If you go to a police station, you will see it in prominent letters. Police is your friend, right? And it is so the cognitive dissonance of seeing it is almost like, it's almost like it's psychological warfare. Every Nigerian knows that, no, the police are not your friend at all right? This isn't new. So I would think any narrative about Nigeria will tackle one form or the other of this kind of lawlessness. So because I'm not living, it's not my experience to talk about. I'm not there. I'm not under its danger. But I can say that I have been under similar dangers when I have been there. I've almost been shot once by the police when we were driving somewhere and we were told to stop by the police, but we didn't hear. And one of them just cocked the gun and then we just slammed on the brakes. All right. They are lawless and they are lawless. They don't value human life. They are supported by people above them. Like no Nigerian police officer stands alone. So because there's a hierarchy of this thing, they know that what they're doing is simply a matter of rebranding. Even if they dissolve SARS, all the employees all the police officers that are in SARS will simply go to other units, and then it will reform itself to something else in a few years' time, because there is really no accountability. They do not care. And the stories you hear are horrific. They have been going on for a time. That's, it's why, people, there's a fella song, it is so apt. It is so apt because you're just there, and you don't, there's no justice from the police, and there's no justice in your chosen field of employment, and you're just stuck. You are literally just stuck. And so people wake up, they go to work, they come back, and they're grateful that they made it home alive. And that's just the way of things. Part of the problem, though, is that a protest against SARS, for example, is not really a protest against SARS. It's a protest against the government that is allowing it to happen. And it would be very difficult for me, for example, seeing what I've seen and knowing what I know, to just assume if they disband SARS, then everything is fine. It's not. It's not even the start. In fact, that may even be a cover-up and a source of non-accountability, because, well, it doesn't exist anymore, and we have forgiven everybody, so everybody go away. That's the end of it. It's a way of drawing a line over the whole thing, whereas the problem still exists.
Thanks for that. That's really, really instructive and informative. And it's interesting to think about various points of overlap and divergence with Black Lives Matter and anti-police movements worldwide. Differences and similarities and things. So thank you very much. I very much appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, so we've got a question from Liz. She had two questions about the subversion of the rape trope in Rosewater. Liz, are you here? Did you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So first of all, just to say thank you, Tade, for your excellent novels and your superb presentation of women. You are a fantastic feminist. Thank you very much for all of that. I was struck by your
thank you.
Well, just to say too that I was very pleased also to see the ellipsis that you use, and also Caro's sort of vomiting reaction in the first interrogation scene, where we don't have to relive that normal rape trope or sexual violence to women. But I was quite struck by what I thought could be a deliberate subversion of that rape trope. And please tell me if I'm right or wrong. Where first of all, you have with Nike, with her what I call almost like a mental rape of Caro, where it's a non-consensual 3 days of driving empathy into him. And similarly in book 3, I don't want to give too much away because I know not everyone's read them, but there is a similar sort of scene with Koriko and Jack, which again, like it's more of a physical thing there, where she's forcing the leg to grow. Obviously, I'm guessing that was conscious, and then also is that it's a certain maybe impatience that we need a more violent reaction, because ultimately it is a form of rape. But these are men of power. They sort of sexist, bigoted attitudes to the people who are sort of turning the tables on them. Are you thinking that the time for polite journalism and articles is past us, that we need something a bit more forceful, should we say? I just wondered what was going on when you decided to use it in that way.
Well, the entire thing, the entire book, even the entire premise of aliens coming into our minds, all of it is rape. It is both. I think one of the more effective ways of getting your theme across is to do it explicitly and implicitly. I wanted there to be several layers of rape going on in the whole thing. So the primary premise is people coming into your minds without your permission. That is the primary premise. And even the reading of the book, there's a reason why I said I made it in first person. The reading of the book is you reading Caro's thoughts, again, without permission. I wanted the reader to experience a telepathy themselves. So the idea is that you're actually reading this guy's thoughts without any kind of permission. You didn't ask permission, you're reading his thoughts. The aliens came and they started listening to our thoughts and connected to us and extracted information from us without our permission. The healing occurred without our permission. It may be something we like, but they didn't ask us if we wanted it or not. Colonialism, neocolonialism, all of these things are without permission. There was one part in the book, in the second book rather, where there's a woman there who tattooed the name of her mother and the name of her village on her body. And that's an actual thing that happens, in West Africa. That particular one, I actually got it from Ghana. So in Ghana, because people are, women are often raped, and often it's not known where their bodies come from, they tattoo their own mother's name and address on their bodies so that they can be identified and taken home dead. And though this is not my story to tell, pretty much every woman in my family has been assaulted in some way or the other, right? Sexually assaulted in some way or the other. So rape is very pervasive. Growing up on that, it was very, very pervasive. And it was necessary for me, I think, for that to permeate the entire thing. So there's rape symbology in all three books at all levels in there. And it's not that I'm saying that it should be subverted. I think that men need to understand it more. I think that more men need to understand actually what rape is and what the consequences of it are. And I think that until they can understand it happening to them in some way or in some form or the other, that empathy about it will kind of be lost. I had some people, for example, some people who read it responded to power in a way that I would say is not intention. Here I've created someone who is misogynistic, who doesn't have who initially didn't have any insight into himself, and it was deliberately written like that. He wasn't supposed to be likable or anything like that. People then took that as, oh yeah, so the author must hate women then or something like that. It was a really difficult thing to take when I was listening to it. But when you write a book, it's in the world. You have to just let people interpret it however they will. So what I was trying to do is to put men and the things that they value under threat, to put colonialism in the context of rape as well, which I did explicitly. I said it explicitly there, as well as trying to show it, in some form or the other. So that's kind of why it was there. Those were difficult things to write, and some of the things, for example, that happened to my my sister and stuff like that, I didn't hear about them till I was an adult. My cousin tried to commit suicide, so I went to see her, and then she was telling me about how, what had happened to her and all of that. So there are lots of things that are not even reported and are not known of. So you go to university and you think that, okay, I'm just going to go study the best I can and get my degree. It isn't like that in Nigeria. A lot of lecturers expect sexual favors from you. There is a whole lot of, there are layers of sexual assault in Nigeria that are unimaginable to you sitting in your comfortable rooms right now. They're unimaginable, but they are there, and they are seen as the norm. They're seen as the way life should go. And we're talking about SARS. This is the thing that they follow women. Women pass the checkpoint and they follow women and they rape them. These things are alive. These are living issues in Nigeria to an extent that you can't imagine. It's not spoken of, except when it bubbles up. Something might come and then it's just swept under the carpet again. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think that it strikes me very strange that anyone so I just wait for Tade to reconnect. I think it's gone. It strikes me as very strange that anyone would say that you wouldn't be a feminist, because I think another thing that you're raising there is, I was interested, for example, with Carol's mother, where she talks about how her, the experience of childbirth, which again, like a womb's taken out, these things are not normally talked about. It's not normally until it happens to you and you find yourself sitting in a play group where these sorts of things come out. And similarly, the stories of fertility, the shock that, when you're actually in your 30s as a woman, those are the stories that you hear all the time. I never heard them in my 20s, like these are the things that are not brought forward and talked about. And, although you perhaps, as you're saying, they're not necessarily, well, your words, I think you can talk about whatever you want, but, not your stories to talk about. You obviously didn't go that far into the fertility, but it was great to see it, mentioned and foregrounded, there. So, can I ask one last thing? Am I right, Tade, in thinking, that the...
Yeah, and there's a thing about that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm listening.
Okay. The incident with Malara, the two incidents with Malara in the first book, is that you sending up, if you like, the sort of collective, because obviously the Xenosphere collects thoughts and emotions. Is that you sending up the collective male porn fantasies that is then turned against Kare, because she sort of forms those, but ultimately she's an asexual digital being who's just trying to manipulate him, and he just goes with it. Is that the right reading, or?
It was precisely that. It was actually inspired by by internet porn and men of a certain age getting addicted to that at the expense of their actual human relationships. That's actually what inspired it. So the entire Xenosphere, actually, part of that, the way it works and all of that came about some experiences that I had, because I worked in IT for a little bit as well. So some of that came with some of the experiences I had when I was working in IT. The degree to which people who get their porn interrupted become enraged was part of what inspired that.
Sorry, I was just laughing to myself over here. And you're aware, Tade, that some people here are going to be writing their essays on these topics. So we've got some quite nice specific questions for you about characters and plot and so on. Okay, so we've got a bunch of hands up at the moment. I'm going to come first to Alex. Do you want to ask your question, Alex?
Hi, Tade. How you doing? Actually, a quick question about Jean. Hi, hello. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. I had a quick question about to do with genre again, but to do with noir, because clearly there's Caro sits in a line of sort of agent detectives, and obviously in Blade Runner is an obvious co-relative or antecedent, and I just wondered if you could say anything about your relationship to noir as a genre, and why or how or in what way that is useful in terms of reading or understanding near future projections.
Okay, so the relationship is it's fairly obvious, and it's almost a cliche. But when I was 15, I read Raymond Chandler and Mickey Spillane, and all the usual suspects when it comes to noir. Reading all of that was formative for me. But in terms of setting a narrative within a kind of noir tradition, it was important because bleakness and pessimism are part and parcel of noir itself. All right. The fact that you cannot win, that there are forces, there is the dogged detective, but there are forces against him. Some of those forces are seductive, which are personified in the femme fatale. Some of them are actually malevolent, which is like it's like the mobsters that are preventing you from solving the case, so to speak. City Hall is against you, the police are against you, the detectives are against you, and you have to somehow gumshoe your way through everything, stumbling and stopping and starting, and then getting beaten up and somehow against all odds, surviving and making it work. To me, that's the story of Nigeria. That's the story of every Nigerian existing right now. Everything is hard, but you have to make your way through it to the end. So to me, it was very appropriate. So I found it very, I found it the right type of era and the right kind of narrative. That bleakness needs to be captured.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Tade. I've got another very quick one about mycelial, the research you did on mycelial networks, because I happened to read it in parallel with this Merlin Sheldrake book, Entangled Life, I think it's called. And it was like, which has only just been published. It was like you'd almost absorbed all that information 3 years before this book was published. I mean, was it something you worked on? Was it an intuitive thing, or was it something you researched in depth?
Well, I didn't have to research it because I did it in medical school. So we learned about fungus, in medical school. I didn't need to research it, but I did need to make a comparison. So it came from a need. I needed to form a network. I needed it to be biological. I needed something that could somehow connect with human thought. And human thought comes in neurons. Neurons are how we do it. So I needed something that could connect with neurons. But the good thing about a fungus is that the hyphae, they are like neurons. The way they transmit information, the way they transmit information back to the cell nucleus, it moves like a neuron. And there have been some experiments done where you can connect to neurons. So I realized that, okay, good. So I can use hyphae in some way or the other. And that's really where that comparison started. I just kind of extrapolated that, as we went along. I was fascinated by the fact that we actually have fungus on our bodies all the time, pretty much all the time. And usually when there's some kind of imbalance is when we become ill from them. So you get skin diseases, like called dermatophytosis, from organisms that are already on your skin. Most of the time you're in balance with them, but when some of the pH levels in the vagina are, they're not quite what they want to be, what they need to be. But, Candida albicans, which gives you thrush, is actually already there. When you get thrush in the mouth, when you get thrush in the mouth or inside the gut, it's organisms that are already around you. It's just that your immunity gets compromised a little bit, and then you get fungal problems. Manifestations of AIDS, for example, is you get meningitis. So we ordinarily live in harmony with fungus in us and on us, and it's not a problem. It's only when we're not actually in balance and not in harmony that they become a problem for us. But that's the reason why I used ketoconazole as a way of blocking the ionosphere. It kills anything that has mycolic acid, which is one of the things in the cell walls of fungi.
That's brilliant, Tade. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm really happy we got a mushroom-related question in as well. So thank you for that one. Okay, John, do you want to ask Tade your question?
It's kind of going back to your point about genre and how science fiction gives you a kind of freedom to break out of some of the sort of bounds that you otherwise would have. But I was wondering whether you find that at all kind of becomes too freeing. And I was thinking about maybe in context of the fact that to some extent you're acting as a kind of translator of Nigerian society into mostly, as far as I'm aware, a British publishing context, and that possibly there's a sense that you might feel, I don't know if you feel like it's a positive or a negative thing, but the fact that you might feel like there's science fiction could render Nigeria kind of render a sense of placelessness when you actually want to have a strong sense of place, but combined with the fact that you're already trying to communicate what many British people would see as an alien place, to how do you kind of balance that sort of freedom of science fiction against the fact that you want to impose certain sort of forms of knowledge on people who perhaps don't already possess them, and whether people would take things too much for granted if they're like, well, this is science fiction, it's just the same as any science fiction I've read, it doesn't matter where it's set, it doesn't matter what the histories are.
Okay. You do it by arguing with your editor. So the problems that you've just described are actually the problems you get in any narrative at all, in any genre. You are always trying to translate something that doesn't actually have a fixed translation. And you're always going to have to make choices about, how do you funnel all of that into a particular form of narrative. So there's the story you want to tell. There is the theme you want to bring across. There are the characters you want to talk about, that you want to explore. And then there's the container that you need to fit it into. Now, in some ways, you're going to allow yourself to do whatever you want, and your editor is to try the burrs to make it fit, because your editor kind of knows where the book is going, the audience that the book is supposed to go to, which means there are certain expectations of the book and certain tropes that they expect to see in there. Now, I don't personally care about tropes at all. I don't care about reader expectation or anything. In fact, the commonest notes that I got from my editor was that was entirely in Yoruba with no translation at all. I did not want to translate. I was like, because I want people to not understand what is going on in this place, because it is the sense of alienation that people feel when they travel from a non-English speaking country to an English speaking country. I wanted that to happen, but my editor thought it would be too alienating. So if you're ever going to publish anything, there are compromises that you have to make. The good thing about it, though, is that there are many of you writing. So I'm not going to write in the same way as someone like Nnedi Okorafor, for example, will write. She has her way, I have my way. Different writers have different ways, and they have different publishers. And what you have to hope is that the entirety of the literature coming out, all of it will somehow form a whole that will bring some manner of completeness. So basically what I'm saying is I'm not worried about it, because it's not just up to me. It's also up to the other writers out there and the other filmmakers and the other poets to bring everything out, and then it kind of forms a whole one way or the other. So I'm not particularly worried about it. I put my foot down on some things that I was told to cut. Things didn't make it easy to absorb, and you can't say everything in one story. You can try, but no matter what it is, I mean, I had to cut 40,000 words out of Rosewater, out of that book. I had to cut 40,000 words out of it because it still has to somehow conform to narrative conventions that are understandable. There's a reason certain conventions exist. It's part of how the text is understood and how the information is absorbed. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, do you want to stubbornly stick to a particular vision and show all of these things, or do you want to say, okay, I'll get this information out this time, and then with subsequent narratives I can get other information out and other emotions that you want to explore. So it's always going to be a choice, always, and there's always going to have to be compromise one way or the other. Otherwise, you sit in your house and you write the stories and you look at them and you're happy looking at them, but they're not going to get anywhere. So you have to make compromises. I'm not worried about the genre thing. It doesn't bother me at all, like I said, because others are doing other things that will make the whole thing complete.
Thank you. That was not what I expected from your answer, but very interesting. Yeah.
Right, folks.
Can I ask a question? What did you?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think that I was expecting you maybe to talk a bit more about preempting or trying to shape people's sort of assumed histories of colonialism, Britain and Nigeria. But then you went off on a much more sort of general kind of thing about genre theory. But yeah, I thought it was very interesting.
Okay, everyone. Tade's got probably another 5.
I can talk about that too if you want.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a bit of a time delay. He's got maybe 5 more minutes because he's obviously had a very long day and he's been extremely generous with his time. And I'm aware we've got quite a few questions. So can I take questions all together? And this will be the last slot, and then we'll let Tade respond as he sees fit. So I've got Michael, Alexi, Liam, and Liz. Can you just give us really snappy single sentence questions for him?
Yeah, hi Tade, thanks for joining us. My question was quite specific, and I was just wondering about whether there was any relationship between your xenosphere and the matrix, the idea of the matrix in William Gibson's Neuromancer. It was interesting to hear that you worked in IT, so I was wondering if there was any influence or relationship between those two like networks, also in relation to like the whole mycelial fungal network as well.
Thanks. And Alexi, do you want to put your question to Tade?
Yeah, hi Tade. You were talking earlier about the way the human mind accommodates to a disaster, and I wondered if there was any particular disaster in Rosewater that you consider the defining disaster of the novel, or whether you think that the disasters interrelate and it's difficult to sort of pick one out.
Thanks. Liam, quick, snappy question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in the book, the US is in quarantine, which ironically it very much isn't right now at the moment. And I wondered why the US seems to be absent in the future, but Little Britain, if you like, is still kind of very there. I mean, I know there's a sort of literal view of that, but I wondered why America seemed to be gone and Britain still prevailed.
Thank you. And then Liz, snappy question.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the trilogy, hybridization is embraced, but it swerves. I won't say what happens in the end, obviously, but it swerves towards some rejection of that entanglement. And I wondered if this is a warning or a rejection from people previously colonized. We've been looking at people like Haraway and Braidotti who talk about a desire for interspecies connections, but is this just a privileged attitude of the people that have never been colonized? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So some of the old ideas come up, but they're familiar to us because we've seen them before, and therefore we resist them with great vigor. Some is that the continuity with the past is lost because of a lot, for many reasons, but continuity with the past is lost. So some people who remember the past or who have read about it will be very vocal in resisting that kind of entanglement that you're talking about, and others will accept it not knowing what has happened before. And we're all in conversation with it. And part of the problem will be, or part of the solution to that rather would be, how can the entanglement be made to be equitable? And this can drag us into conversations about reparations, exactly what equality mean, which will take us all night, which I love to talk about, but will take us all night, so we're going to avoid that. But basically it's that if you've had a bad experience of it in the past, consenting to it in the future becomes a lot more difficult. Inspiration for this. I'm a fan, but it wasn't drawn on that at all. It was more drawn on things that I saw about the human body, and I think one of your lectures actually mentioned that. It's the idea that a human body is a patchwork of not just what are human cells, but also alien cells or cells that are microorganisms. But for example, every human cell has something inside called the mitochondria, and any reputable biologist will tell you that the mitochondria probably wasn't the human cells to start with. It looks like a bacteria. It probably is some other kind of organism that we absorbed into our own DNA. And there are lots of parts of the human genome that we think are viruses that infected us in the past, but that we somehow absorbed. So parts of humanity that are not human, And I even, you will even see theories about the brain itself because of the similarity to other, to natural brain. Also been something else that we absorb was being put together. So it was from that the Xenosphere came, not from unless it was a subconscious influence, in which case yes, because obviously everything you've read before will always feature into whatever you are creating, but not in a conscious fashion. The US and quarantine. So one of that was an extrapolation. So I kind of mentioned it before that you saw this creeping fascism happening, and one of the things that you see is a kind of nationalism, which is a really malignant idea. It's an extremely malignant idea, but you get this nationalism which tends towards, well, we're self-sufficient, therefore we don't need anybody else. For Britain, because Little Britain is still there. One of the reasons Britain is there is this: there is a misconception that Britain, the United Kingdom, is somehow able to exist on its own, whereas in actual fact, there's a kind of delusion that we hold, which at the same time holding the idea that actually it's because we have a favored status with the United States. But what we don't understand is that there is a selfishness inherent in the nationalism of the United States that would lead them to closing themselves up. And that is really the reason the US doesn't exist in the world of Rosewater. Their nationalism has extrapolated itself to its natural conclusion, which is we don't need anybody else, so we're just going to stay apart from you. The United Kingdom got shafted in that relationship. That's why the United Kingdom is still there. But it's really irrelevant as well, because basically it's Russia and China who are the dominant nations of the world, and England is nothing. England, Wales, they don't feature. So that's kind of what I tried to do there. I hope I got everyone's question. That's as fast as I can. As fast as I can go.
Thank you so much, Tade. I think I speak for everyone here when I say that was absolutely fantastic. You're such an articulate and informed speaker, so it's a real pleasure to hear you talk. We're incredibly grateful that you gave up some of your time to come and speak to us. And many of the students on here are probably going to be writing their essays about your books. So we're really grateful for the books themselves, as well as your thoughts on them. So yeah, can everyone join me in thanking Tade, and take care. Yeah, hope we might see you again sometime.
Right. Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it. And good luck in your essays and your future writings. Right.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot. Bye, Tade. Bye.
Thank you.